yesterday's news.
Hello, welcome to Old News, the programme and podcast which looks at news stories of the day through the papers of yesterday. Silting, well, not been far from the news of late, has it, with dredging going on in Douglas Harbour as we speak, and silt in various harbours has often been in the news. It is most certainly old news going back, well over 100 years. For example, I take you to the Mona's Herald of Wednesday, October the 12th, 1870. In a short piece entitled Silting at the New Landing Pier, to the editor of Mona's Herald, this is in the letters section, "Sir, can you inform me whether the report is correct that silting has already commenced at the new landing pier, that a bank of sand more than 2 feet in depth has formed, and that on more than one occasion lately the steamers have grounded at the berth where in the early part of the season they had ample water? Yours respectfully, Inquirer." Sound vaguely familiar? Perhaps it does. 1922 in the Alaban Examiner, Friday, July the 14th. Silting at Peel Harbour, we are told, partly averted. The Alaban Harbour Board, in the course of their report for the year ended the 30th of June last, stated that 2 weirs have now been completed at Peel and a timber groin has been run out to a length of 500 feet. They expressed the opinion that these erections have considerably reduced the accumulation of sand at the entrance to the harbour. The increase of silt for the past year has been 2.297 cubic yards, which is considerably less than the average increase per year since 1914. A gradually decreasing sum is being spent on the removal of this silt. Sounds familiar again, doesn't it? And it is hoped that the erection of the weirs and groin will at least render it unnecessary to dredge again for some years, and may even result in dredging being given up altogether. I think it was for some time, was it not? Good to see this was over 100 years ago. Underneath, a fascinating little piece just entitled "The Poor Old White Elephant" as well, which isn't silting, but I'll read it to you in any case. In the same document, it is reported that the board proposed to submit to Tynwald proposals for repairs of a permanent character at the Queen's Pier in Ramsey, which are expected considerably to reduce the future cost of upkeep. Permission has been given for the running of an electric bus service, very green, and it is hoped that as a result greater use will be made of the pier and more money received in tolls. Perhaps we'll see an electric bus service running along the pier again at some stage in the future. We live in hope. The Mona's Herald, Wednesday, November the 26th, 1924, a very long article about the drainage inquiry, silt in the Sulby River. Who is to blame? Providence or Commons trustees? It starts, "The long-expected inquiry into the liability of the government in connection with the cleaning of the Sulby River, the Len Trench and the Culane Trench opened at Ramsey on Friday before the commission appointed by the Governor and composed of Messrs C.T.W. Hughes Games, V.G., M. Corrine J.P. and R.F. Douglas J.P. The Commission decided to deal with the Sulby River first. The reference of the appointment dealt with the work done by prisoners of war labour in the cleaning of the river. Having regard to the conditions of the river before the work began, the causes responsible for its condition, the degree of benefit derived from the work, and the effect of the drainage of the mountains on the condition of the river. The claim for assistance, it goes on, is based principally on the assumption that most of the silt, gravel and sand which collects on the bed of the Sulby River is washed down from the mountains in times of heavy floods. In the ordinary course, as the chairman, Mr. Hugh Games, put it poignantly, the blame might be apportioned in the first place to nature and ultimately to Providence. But it appeared that around 40 years ago the common lands among the mountains were drained, and it is to this that the whole trouble is laid. 30-odd years ago, this conduct of the Commons trustees might have been actionable. Now, of course, any redress at law is statute barred. We're told the courthouse was crowded with a large number of Northside farmers. The 3 members for Ayr, 3 members, in the House of Keys, Messrs Kane, Tier and Crellin, Mr E.J. Curfey, H.K. and Messrs W.C. Southwood, MLC and J.D. Clucas, MLC, took an active part in the direction of the proceedings. Mr. E.C. Neen represented the Commons trustees, and Mr. S.J. Neal appeared for a number of interested farmers and owners. And as I say, I won't read it all. It's a long article, goes on over several columns. The work of cleaning the river, we're told, and the general supervision of the drainage area is in the hands of the Highway Board, who borrowed money to execute the work but failed to collect the rate levied on the area. Consequently, a large part of the debt now accumulated, which it is claimed should be met by government grant, is bank interest on an overdraft. Oh dear. Good to see it still went wrong over 100 years ago. The Examiner, Friday, September the 10th, 1926, has an article on silting on Port Erin foreshore, sand heaped over the roadway, public inquiry. The Harbour Board held a public inquiry at Port Erin on Wednesday in order to discuss means of preventing the drift of sand from Port Erin Bay into the Breakwater Road on the south side of the shore. The inquiry followed an interview between the Harbour Board and fishermen and others affected by the accumulation of sand. The Receiver General presided, and other members of the board present were Messrs. C. Gill and J. F. Crellin, together with the Secretary, Mr. A. W. Tongue, and the Engineer, Mr. W. H. Blaker. The Receiver General opened the proceedings and said the erection of a groin had been suggested, but the board would not take up such a course unless with the agreement of all parties, because nobody could predict what the effect of the groin would be. The accumulation was undoubtedly due to the erection of the Raglan Pier and was quite unexpected when the pier was built. However, the pier was there for weal or woe. That's a fine phrase, isn't it? If the groin would not be unsightly or have a prejudicial effect on the harbour, they would consider it, but certainly something would have to be done. And it was made quite clear that there were differing views. Edward Stevens, a fisherman, thought the groins would destroy the beauty of the shore. And John Joseph McCard, I'm assuming of the same McCards we know of today, chairman of the Port Erin Village Commissioners, said the commissioners had considered the subject, but they expressed no decided opinion as to what should be done, hedging their bets there. But it was made clear, it says at the end of the article, before the gathering dispersed, the Harbour Board had no intention of forcing the groin or any other project upon the people of Port Erin. They would do nothing unless they were satisfied that it would affect the desired object and unless the people of Port Erin were behind them. 1926 in the Mona's Herald, Wednesday, August the 11th. Peel Harbour is silting up, we're told. Soundings taken last month in Peel Harbour of the area dredged in 1914 show that silting has taken place within this year to the extent of 3,470 cubic yards during the preceding 12 months. The total quantity of silt deposited in the dredged area since 1914 is 47,252 cubic yards. The silting described indicates that number 1 groin appears to have reached the limit of its capacity to retain material. Sand is being carried around the seaward end of it and being deposited in the dredged area. The Times, Isle of Man Times. Saturday, March the 25th, 1944. Manx Harbour Problems, the article is entitled. Deepening suggested at Castletown. It's all around the island, this. Alleged silting at Peel and engineers' vigorous rejoinder. Where is the Irish quay at Castletown? The Receiver General, who's been in charge of the island's harbours for 10 years, had never heard of the name until a few days ago, when the Harbour Commissioners were discussing a proposal to put a small lighthouse there. Though the cost is to be only £50, the Receiver General told Tynwald on Tuesday that it will be a real lighthouse, and like that at Laxey, will be both useful and of good appearance. Very good value at £50 even in 1944, one would have thought. The Speaker, who is Castletown's representative in the Keys, was gratified on hearing of the Harbour Board's intention to do something at Castletown, but suggested that the harbour should be deepened by a foot to make it accessible to the ordinary little boats at the bottom of neap tides. Recently, many boats had to go to Port St Mary and send the cargoes back by land. The Receiver General agreed that another foot depth would be desirable, but said there was a danger of undermining the whole quay. He was not an engineer, but he believed that was one of the snags. Mr Moore, the member for Peel, asserted that with a strong north or northwest wind, there was a terrible run in Peel Harbour, so that small fishing boats found it very difficult to hold on, and engines worth £600 or £900 were in danger of great damage. He therefore suggested that the Harbour Commissioners should consider the question of putting a pier starting somewhere a third of the way from the harbour point to the railway station and running halfway across the harbour, which would give shelter on the south side. And finally, as recently as 1955, a mere, 70-odd years ago, mine Silt gets into Laxey Harbour. At a sitting of Tynwald on Tuesday, £1,100 was voted to the Highway Board to enable them to clear silt from the Agnish Dam. Mr Crowe, chairman of the board, said trouble had been caused at Laxey Harbour by material coming in floods from the Snaefell mines. I think it caused trouble more recently as well, didn't it? Clearing the silt from the dam could easily be done, and it will prevent damage being done to the harbour. As I say, silt, not a new problem on the Isle of Man, at least 150 years old, and probably much longer than that. Whichever way you look at it, it is most certainly a problem and old news. Until next week, cheerio.
You're gonna be yesterday's news.